John never thought moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood would change his life in such a strange way. He was a calm man, a man who wanted peace, and after years of working in crowded cities and noisy apartments, this little neighborhood seemed like a perfect place to finally rest. The streets were clean, the lawns were neat, and almost every house looked the same. It was the kind of place where people waved to each other while walking their dogs and where children rode their bikes without fear. But for John, the peace didn't last long, because across the street lived Mrs. Karen. Mrs. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the head of the HOA, the Homeowners Association, and she loved reminding everyone of her power. Her rules were strict, her voice was loud, and her eyes missed nothing. If your grass was too long, Karen sent you a warning. If your car was parked the wrong way, Karen wrote a complaint. And if you didn't follow her orders, she made your life difficult. At first, John thought he could ignore her. After all, he was busy with work. He had a small home office, and most of his time was spent on projects. He didn't care about neighborhood drama. But soon, he noticed something strange happening right outside his house. It began small. One morning, when John went outside to bring his trash can back in, he found it lying on its side. He thought maybe the wind had knocked it down. The weather had been rough the night before, and it didn't seem like a big deal. He picked it up, shrugged, and went back inside. But the next day, the same thing happened. And the day after that. Every single night, John's trash can ended up on the ground. The lid open, the garbage spilling slightly onto the driveway. First, he laughed it off. Maybe raccoons were in the area. Maybe kids were playing pranks. He didn't want to assume the worst. But something didn't sit right with him, because every time he looked across the street, he saw her. Karen. She stood by her window, curtains pulled slightly open, watching. Not just watching, but smiling. It wasn't the kind of friendly smile neighbors gave. It was sharp, almost mocking. And when John bent down to pick up his trash can, he could swear her smile grew wider. John didn't like confrontation. He wasn't the type to storm across the street and start a shouting match. But inside, something was boiling. Why was she doing this? Why would a grown woman, the head of the HOA, waste her time knocking over a neighbor's trash can? It seemed childish, almost laughable. But for Karen, it wasn't about fun. It was about control. The more it happened, the more John realized it wasn't random. She was doing it on purpose. Every night, like clockwork, his trash can fell. Every morning, he had to clean up. And every time Karen watched, the neighbors pretended not to see. They avoided his eyes when they walked by. They knew what Karen was capable of, and they didn't want to get on her bad side. She had a reputation for ruining people. She could raise their HOA fees, send endless warnings, and even pressure them to sell their homes if she didn't like them. Most people simply obeyed her, afraid of what might happen if they resisted. But John was different. He had dealt with bullies before, at work, in life, and he wasn't going to let a woman with too much free time push him around. Still, he didn't act right away. He waited. He watched. He studied her habits. Late at night, when the streets were dark, he sat by his upstairs window and kept an eye on his trash can. And one night, he finally caught her in the act. The clock read 11:47 p.m. The street was quiet. A single street lamp flickered near his driveway. John sat in the shadows of his room, the lights turned off, waiting. And then he saw her, Karen. She crept across the street like a thief, though her posture was proud, almost defiant. She wore a long robe, and her slippers slapped softly against the pavement. She didn't even look around to check if anyone was watching. She went straight to his trash can, placed her hand on the side, and pushed. The can fell to the ground with a loud plastic thud. The lid popped open. A few pieces of trash spilled onto the driveway. And then, she smiled. Not a smile of mischief, but a smile of victory. As if this simple act proved she had power over him. She didn't even hurry away. She walked back to her house slowly, proudly, like a queen returning to her throne. John sat there, his fists clenched. The evidence was clear now. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She wasn't just strict. She was cruel. And she enjoyed it. But what Karen didn't know was that John wasn't just an ordinary man. He had knowledge, skills, and secrets she couldn't even imagine. Inside his garage were tools, machines, and unfinished projects. John wasn't just a homeowner. He was an engineer. He worked with advanced robotics and artificial intelligence, building things that most people would call science fiction. And now, because of Karen, he had a reason to use those skills in a very different way. For the next few days, John pretended nothing had changed. He picked up his trash can each morning like usual. He nodded politely when he passed neighbors. He didn't confront Karen, didn't accuse her, didn't even let her see his anger. But inside his mind, gears were turning. Plans were forming. She thought it was just a trash can. But soon she would learn the truth. Because John was building something. Something that would turn her little game into a nightmare. And when it was ready, Karen would regret ever laying her hands on his trash can. The next week passed, and the pattern never changed. Every morning, John walked out to his driveway, and every morning, the trash can lay on its side. Sometimes the lid was thrown far into the grass. Sometimes garbage spilled across the concrete. Sometimes it was just tipped over and left open, as if Karen wanted him to notice her signature move. And every time, when John bent down to clean it up, he felt her eyes. From across the street, behind her curtains, Karen was watching. She didn't even hide anymore. Sometimes she even stood on her porch, sipping coffee, as if daring him to say something. John kept calm. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing him angry. Instead, he simply picked up the trash, washed his hands, and went back inside. On the outside, he looked patient. On the inside, his anger was building like a storm. But Karen wasn't done. Her harassment grew worse. One morning, John found a folded note taped to his front door. The paper was thin, the handwriting sharp and messy. It read, "Your trash can is not HOA approved. Replace it immediately. Karen." John stared at the note, his jaw tightening. There was nothing wrong with his trash can. It was the same kind every other house used. But Karen didn't care about rules. She cared about control. That same week, she left another note. This time it was longer. "Your garbage can is an eyesore. It lowers the value of our neighborhood. The HOA expects better. If you refuse to comply, I will bring this up at the next meeting." John didn't need to attend a meeting to know what that meant. She would twist the story, paint him as the problem, and make sure every neighbor turned against him. The neighbors, of course, stayed silent. They all knew Karen's tactics. Nobody dared to defend him. Some even avoided looking at him when he walked by, as if afraid Karen might see them being friendly. John realized he wasn't just fighting for his trash can. He was fighting against Karen's control, and that made him more determined. Night after night, he watched her repeat her strange little ritual. Sometimes she tiptoed across the street in her robe. Other times she simply strutted over like she owned the road. Once, she even laughed as she pushed the trash can so hard it rolled halfway down the driveway. John never confronted her. Not yet. Instead, he kept taking notes. He wrote down the time she came, how she pushed the can, even how long she lingered afterward. At one point, he even set up a small hidden camera in his window, angled just right to catch her movements. Every night, the recordings confirmed what he already knew. Karen was obsessed. But what she didn't know was that John was also preparing. In his garage, the real work began. The neighbors thought John was just fixing his car or working on hobbies. But in truth, he was designing something new, something powerful. John had worked in robotics for years. He understood machines better than most people understood people. And as Karen kept playing her petty games, he was building the perfect response. The sound of drills and the hum of machinery filled his garage late at night. Blue sparks flickered as he welded parts together. Pieces of metal and wires were spread across his workbench. Bit by bit, a shape began to form, one that looked very familiar. A trash can. But this one was no ordinary bin. It had reinforced plating inside. It had hidden motion sensors, designed to detect even the smallest movement. It had gears, mechanisms, and systems that could activate in seconds. And inside its lid, John placed something special, an AI system he had been developing for months. A small program designed to react like a guard dog. It could track, analyze, and respond to movement. Every night, while Karen laughed at her little victories, John was smiling too, because he knew soon the game would change. Still, he didn't rush. He wanted Karen to believe she was winning. He let her think she was untouchable. And the more confident she became, the more careless she was. One morning, John found the trash can tipped over so violently that half the garbage was thrown into his yard. Karen had gone further this time, as if testing how much humiliation he could take. From her porch, she called out casually, "Oh, John, looks like your trash can doesn't want to stay upright. Maybe it's time for a new one." Her voice was sweet on the surface, but dripping with poison underneath. John simply smiled politely and waved. He didn't answer. He didn't give her the argument she wanted. But deep inside, his plan grew sharper. She thought he was weak. She thought he was passive. She thought this was just about a trash can. But soon, she would learn that John wasn't playing her game. He was building his own. By the end of the week, the prototype was ready. It looked ordinary, almost identical to the can she kept knocking over. But inside, it was alive in a way no trash can should ever be. And when Karen touched it next, she would discover something she never expected. She thought it was just a trash can, but she had no idea what was waiting inside. John was a patient man. He had learned that patience often gave better results than anger. And so, while Karen laughed, while she pushed his trash can night after night, he worked silently in his garage. To the neighbors, it looked like John was just another man fixing things. They sometimes saw the garage light glowing past midnight. They sometimes heard the hum of drills, the click of tools, and the sharp sound of metal being cut. Nobody asked questions. In this neighborhood, people minded their own business, especially when Karen was involved. But what nobody knew was that inside that garage, something extraordinary was taking shape. The floor was covered with blueprints, wires, and half-finished parts. On one table lay pieces of steel plating, small motors, and polished gears. On another sat a laptop, its screen glowing with lines of code. And in the middle of it all stood John, his face lit by the dim yellow lamp above, his hands busy tightening bolts and connecting circuits. He wasn't just building a machine. He was designing a trap. The shape was familiar, a trash can. But this trash can was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. First, he reinforced its structure. Ordinary plastic could be pushed, kicked, or knocked over. But this one was lined with hidden steel. No matter how hard Karen shoved, it would not fall. Next, he added sensors, tiny eyes hidden inside the lid and sides. These sensors would detect movement, heat, even pressure. If anyone touched it, the can would know. But that wasn't enough. John wanted it to do more than resist. He wanted it to respond. So he gave it arms. Not human arms, of course, but small mechanical ones that could extend from the sides. They were designed to grip, to block, even to push back. To anyone watching, it would look like the trash can was alive. And then came the most important part, the brain. For months, John had been developing a special AI program. It wasn't a full computer mind, but it was smart enough to detect threats and react. He uploaded it into a small chip, carefully hidden inside the trash can's body. This was its command center, its nervous system. With this, the can could learn, could watch, could adapt. John tested it late at night. He would walk near it, and the lid would snap shut by itself. He would touch it, and the arms would twitch, ready to act. He even programmed it to lock itself in place, heavy bolts digging into the ground so no one could move it once it was armed. The more he tested it, the more real it felt. Almost like a guard dog, silent until provoked, loyal to its owner, always ready to protect. And John felt a strange satisfaction. This wasn't just about a trash can anymore. This was about standing up to someone who believed she was untouchable. Karen had bullied neighbors for years, using her power, her threats, her influence. Nobody had ever dared to fight back. But John wasn't like the others. He had tools she could never understand. One night, as he tightened the last bolt and sealed the final panel, he stepped back and looked at his creation. It looked ordinary. A simple gray trash can. something you would walk past without a second glance. But inside, it was something else entirely. John whispered softly to himself, "Let's see you push this one, Karen." The next morning, he rolled the trash can outside. His heart beat faster as he placed it at the edge of his driveway. To anyone watching, it looked the same as always. Plastic lid, wheels, a handle, nothing special. Karen was watching, of course. She stood on her porch, her arms crossed, a smile tugging at her lips. She thought she had already won this little war. She thought John was too weak, too quiet to fight back. John gave her a polite nod before heading back inside. But behind his calm eyes, there was fire. That night would be different. That night, the trash can would no longer be her toy. The hours ticked by slowly. The street grew quiet. A thin mist settled over the lawns. The neighborhood slipped into sleep, but John stayed awake, waiting. From his darkened upstairs window, he watched. His invention sat in place, silent, waiting for its first test. At exactly midnight, he saw her. Karen. She wore the same robe, the same smug expression. She didn't hurry, didn't sneak. She walked proudly across the street, as if the road itself belonged to her. Her slippers slapped softly against the pavement, her hands swinging with confidence. She reached the trash can and gave it a shove. But this time, nothing happened. The can didn't move. It didn't fall. Stood firm, locked to the ground. Karen frowned. She pushed again, harder. Still nothing. And then the lid creaked. Slowly, it opened by itself, releasing a low hiss, like steam escaping. A faint red light glowed inside, just enough to paint her face in a strange, eerie shine. Karen froze. Her eyes widened as she stepped back. The can wasn't just standing still, it was watching her. And then, for the first time, one of its hidden arms twitched, sliding slightly from its side with a metallic sound. Karen gasped, stumbling backward. She stared at the thing in shock, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She spun on her heels and hurried back toward her house, her slippers slapping faster against the ground. From his window, John smiled. The first test had worked. His invention was alive. Karen had no idea what she had just awakened. And this was only the beginning. The night after John's invention first revealed itself, the neighborhood was strangely quiet. It was as if the street itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Karen, however, was not the type to give up so easily. She was embarrassed, yes. Shocked, yes. But inside her heart burned something darker. Pride. She could not stand the idea of losing. She could not stand the thought that a simple man like John had dared to resist her. All day, she replayed the moment in her mind. The way the trash can had refused to fall. The way the lid had opened by itself. That faint red light glowing like an eye in the dark. And those strange metallic sounds. No, she told herself it couldn't be real. Trash cans didn't move. Trash cans didn't glow. She must have imagined it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe John had done some trick. And so, by the time night came again, her fear had turned back into anger. She stood at her window, glaring across the street at the silent trash can sitting in John's driveway. It looked so ordinary, so harmless, as if mocking her. Her jaw tightened. She wouldn't let a piece of plastic defeat her. Just before midnight, she stepped out of her house. The night air was cold, but she didn't care. She marched across the street, her robe trailing behind her, her slippers striking the pavement with sharp little sounds. From his upstairs window, John watched silently. His heart beat faster, but his face remained calm. He knew this moment would come. This was the real test. Karen reached the trash can. She placed her hand on the lid, sneering. "You're just a bin," she muttered under her breath. Then, with a sharp push, she tried to knock it over. Nothing happened. The can didn't budge. Karen's sneer deepened. She pushed again, harder this time, her muscles straining. But the can remained upright, locked to the ground with hidden bolts. And then, the lid opened, slowly, smoothly, as if the can itself had decided to respond. A hiss of compressed air escaped, followed by a soft mechanical whir. From inside, a faint red glow lit the night, casting long shadows across the driveway. Karen froze. Her hand dropped back. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The glow grew brighter. The trash can seemed to be alive. And then something moved. From one side, a thin metallic arm slid out, unfolding with sharp clicks. It wasn't long, only the length of a forearm, but it was enough to make her step back. The arm twitched once, then extended fully, its metal fingers clenching as if testing their strength. Karen gasped and stumbled backward. What is this?" she whispered. The trash can turned slightly, its sensors tracking her. To Karen, it looked as though the can was looking directly at her. Her heart pounded in her chest. She turned, nearly tripping over her own feet, and ran back toward her house. Her robe flapped wildly as she sprinted across the street. She didn't stop until she slammed her front door shut behind her. Breathing hard, her face pale. From his window, John finally allowed himself a smile. The first encounter was complete. The machine had worked perfectly. Karen was scared, and that was only the beginning. But Karen's pride would not let her stay silent. The very next morning, she stood on her porch again, trying to act normal. She sipped her coffee, but her eyes were locked on John's driveway. Her face looked calm, but John could see the tension in the way she gripped her cup. Neighbors walked past, waving politely. Some whispered among themselves, curious about why Karen looked so restless. She didn't mention what had happened the night before. How could she? If she told people she was attacked by a trash can, they would laugh at her. So she kept her secret, but inside, her anger grew. And that night she returned. This time she came prepared. She carried a long stick, the kind used for pulling down tree branches. Her plan was simple. Knock the trash can down with the stick, prove it was just ordinary plastic, and erase the fear that had gripped her. From his window, John saw her coming. His hand hovered near the small control tablet on his desk. But he didn't interfere. He wanted to see what his creation would do on its own. Karen reached the trash can, her jaw set, her eyes blazing. She raised the stick high and slammed it against the can's side. The sound was loud, metal against metal, not plastic. Karen frowned. She hit it again, harder, and that was when the can reacted. With a sharp hiss, the lid snapped shut. Both mechanical arms shot out from the sides, faster this time. One arm grabbed the stick with a sudden, powerful grip. The other snapped the stick clean in half with a single motion. The broken pieces clattered to the driveway. Karen screamed. Her voice pierced the quiet night, and lights flicked on in nearby houses. Curtains shifted as neighbors peeked out to see what was happening. Karen stumbled backward, staring at the trash can with wide, terrified eyes. She could still see that faint red glow shining from inside the lid. The can stood firm, its arms twitching slightly before folding back into its body. Then it went silent again, looking as ordinary as ever. But the neighbors had seen. They had seen Karen scream. They had seen her run. And whispers began to spread. From his window, John watched everything unfold. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The machine had spoken for him. Karen's reign of control had finally met something stronger than her pride. But John knew this was far from over. Karen wouldn't stop. She couldn't stop. And the more she fought, the more she would expose herself. He leaned back in his chair, smiling to himself. She thought it was just a trash can, he whispered. But this is only the beginning. The trash can had already won its first battle. Karen had run from it once, screamed at it twice, and been humiliated in front of her neighbors. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat. Not her. Not the queen of the HOA. For 2 days she stayed quiet. She didn't come out at night. She didn't cross the street. She didn't even look at John's driveway. But inside her house, she was boiling with rage. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. The lid opening by itself, the glowing red light, the metallic arms snapping her stick in half. She hated that trash can. She hated it more than anything. And most of all, she hated John. She told herself that this wasn't just about a bin anymore. This was about power. If she lost, the neighbors would see her weakness. If she lost, her control over the HOA would slip. She had to win no matter what. And so, on the third night, Karen returned. This time, she didn't come with a stick. She came with tools. A hammer, a crowbar, and a flashlight. If the trash can wanted to act like a machine, she would break it like a machine. From his window, John saw her creeping across the street. He shook his head slightly, almost amused. She just couldn't stop. She was too proud, too stubborn. Karen knelt beside the can, gripping the crowbar tightly. "Let's see what you're made of," she muttered. She wedged the metal bar under the lid and pushed hard. The trash can hissed. The lid snapped open, red light spilling out like a warning. Both arms shot out faster than before. One grabbed the crowbar, yanking it from her hands and tossing it across the driveway. The other arm swung down sharply, hitting the hammer and sending it skidding into the grass. Karen screamed again, louder than ever. But she didn't stop. She raised her flashlight and smashed it against the side of the can. The beam flickered once and then went out completely as the bulb shattered. And then the trash can reacted harder than ever before. The ground bolts dug deeper into the concrete, locking it firmly in place. The arms extended fully, blocking her path. A sharp mechanical voice, one John had programmed, echoed from inside the can. "Unauthorized contact detected. Step away immediately." Karen's face went pale. The neighbor's lights turned on again. Curtains shifted. More people were watching now. Karen backed away slowly, her body trembling, her eyes wide. She wanted to scream at John, but her throat felt dry. She wanted to call the police, but how could she explain it? "It's a trash can," she whispered to herself. "It's just a trash can." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had seen something. Everyone had heard Karen's screams. Whispers passed from porch to porch, from mailbox to mailbox. "Did you hear what happened last night?" Karen was yelling at something in John's driveway. "I swear I saw that trash can move." People laughed nervously, but there was also curiosity in their eyes. Nobody trusted Karen enough to take her word, but nobody could deny what they'd seen. Karen, however, was furious. She couldn't let the gossip spread. She needed to take back control. So she called a special meeting of the HOA. By evening, several members stood in her living room, sipping tea and nodding politely as she told her story. But Karen twisted the truth as she always did. "That man, John, has installed some kind of illegal device," she declared, her voice sharp. "It's dangerous. It attacked me. Could hurt anyone. We need to make him remove it immediately." The board members exchanged uncertain glances. One of them asked softly, "Karen, are you saying a trash can attack you?" Karen's face turned red. "Not just a trash can. A machine. He's hiding something in there. You didn't see it. It has arms. Lights. It's dangerous." The room fell silent for a moment. The members shifted uncomfortably. Some wanted to believe her. Others weren't so sure. Finally, one man cleared his throat. "If what you say is true, then we should inspect it ourselves. Tonight." Karen agreed instantly. She wanted them to see. She wanted proof. And most of all, she wanted John humiliated. That night, the HOA board gathered at the edge of John's driveway. Karen stood proudly among them, her chin high, her eyes burning with determination. John watched from his window, calm and silent. He had expected this. He had been waiting for this moment. One board member stepped forward, chuckling. "It's just a trash can. She probably imagined things." He reached out and gave the can a little push. Nothing happened. The group laughed softly. Karen's face darkened. "Push harder," she snapped. The man shrugged and shoved the can with both hands. And then, the lid opened. The red light glowed brighter than ever before, spilling across the driveway. The arms shot out, snapping into place with sharp metallic clicks. The voice echoed again, louder this time. "Unauthorized contact detected. Step away immediately." The board members froze. Karen's proud smile returned, until the can moved further. The arms didn't just block this time. One arm swung wide, knocking a clipboard from a man's hands. the other arm extended toward another member, stopping just inches from his chest. The members jumped back in shock. One of them tripped over the curb. Another nearly fell into the grass. The machine hissed again, louder, its bolts locking tighter into the ground. Final warning. Step away immediately. The board members scattered, running back toward Karen's house. Their faces were pale, their voices stuttering in fear. Karen stood frozen for a moment, her confidence shattering once again. She wanted to order them back, but they were gone. She wanted to scream at John, but the words died on her tongue. From his window, John smiled calmly, his eyes watching her with quiet triumph. Karen had wanted the board to humiliate him. Instead, they had seen the truth and they had run. The escalation had begun, and John knew the war was almost over. The neighborhood was no longer the same. For weeks, people had whispered about John's trash can. Some claimed they saw it move. Others swore it spoke. A few even said it tried to grab them. Nobody knew the full truth, but everyone agreed on one thing. Something strange was happening at John's house. And at the center of it all stood Karen. Once the feared queen of the HOA, now a woman slowly losing her grip on power. The board members had seen enough to doubt her. The neighbors had heard her screams in the night. Her reputation, once untouchable, was now cracked. But Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. She had lost battles before, but never a war. And in her mind, this was war. This ends tonight, she told herself as she stood before her mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from nights of anger and sleeplessness. But her voice was steady. Her pride fueled her. She picked up her phone and made one last call. The entire HOA board would return, this time with her leading them. Together, they would tear down that cursed trash can and expose John once and for all. That evening, the board gathered again at the edge of John's driveway. They looked nervous, whispering among themselves. Some wanted to turn back. Others tried to laugh it off. But Karen's voice cut through their doubt. "You are board members of this community," she snapped. "Are you really afraid of a trash can?" Her words stung them into silence. John, meanwhile, sat in his darkened office upstairs, watching everything unfold. His creation stood silently outside, waiting. He had fine-tuned its systems, upgraded its sensors, and programmed one final surprise. Tonight would decide everything. The first board member stepped forward cautiously. Let's just see what happens." He reached out and pushed the can. The lid snapped open instantly. The red glow flooded the driveway. The arms shot out with a loud metallic clang. "Unauthorized contact detected. Step away immediately." The group jumped back in shock, but Karen stepped forward boldly. "Ignore it," she shouted. "It's just a machine. Smash it if you have to." Another member raised a broomstick he had brought, swinging it at the can. The arm intercepted it in midair, snapping the stick in half like dry wood. The pieces clattered to the ground. The neighbors were watching now. Windows glowed, curtains shifted, and silhouettes lined the glass. Some even stepped outside quietly, phones in hand, recording. Karen didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. Her pride blinded her to everything else. She screamed and lunged forward herself, striking the trash can with her bare hands. The machine responded instantly. The lid slammed shut with a metallic crash. The arms extended wider than before, blocking her path completely. Then, for the first time, a new feature activated. From inside the can, a bright projection flickered to life on the driveway. A holographic warning message appeared in bold letters. "Property protected. Trespassers will be reported." And then, John's voice echoed from inside the can. "This is your final warning. Do not touch my property again." The crowd gasped. The neighbors recording on their phones whispered in shock. Karen froze. Her face went red, then pale, then red again. She turned slowly, realizing every eye in the neighborhood was on her. Her control was gone. Her pride was gone. And in that moment, she wasn't the queen of the HOA. She was just a neighbor who had been caught, humiliated in front of everyone. The board members stepped back, shaking their heads. One of them muttered, "This has gone too far. Karen, we're done." They walked away, leaving her alone in the glow of the red light. From his window, John watched silently. His plan had worked perfectly. He hadn't needed to shout, argue, or beg for fairness. He had let the truth reveal itself. Karen had been exposed, not by his words, but by her own actions. The trash can's arms slowly folded back. The light dimmed. The lid shut quietly. In seconds, it looked ordinary again, as if nothing had happened. Karen stood there trembling, her fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred and shame. But she didn't dare touch it again. She couldn't. Finally, she turned and walked back to her house. Not proudly, not with confidence, but slowly, shoulders slumped, her robe dragging behind her. For the first time since John had moved into the neighborhood, Karen was silent. The days that followed were different. Karen no longer left notes on doors. She no longer shouted at neighbors for small mistakes. She no longer stood at her window, smirking across the street. She avoided John's house completely. Some said she was too embarrassed. Others said she was scared. But whatever the reason, the result was the same: peace. The neighbors noticed too. They smiled more. They waved at John. Some even whispered thank you when Karen wasn't around. The fear she had cast over the neighborhood was finally gone. And the trash can? It stood quietly at the edge of John's driveway, looking ordinary, harmless, just like any other bin. Only John knew the truth. Only he knew what was inside. Sometimes, late at night, he would glance out his window at it. A faint smile would cross his lips. She thought it was just a trash can, he whispered to himself. But it was more than that. Much more. Karen never touched it again. And the neighborhood never forgot the night the trash can fought back.